Fair Fight for Change is a 10-step process to negotiate what we would like. This is what we've been working our way toward. We want to make sure that as we first just learned to be present, learned our first building blocks of goodwill, empathy, compassion, and bonding, and we learned the logic of love and emotion. We learned how to be pleasurable in somebody else's life. Now we got into conflict, right? The longer we stay on the field with somebody, we're going to have conflict. It's not if we're going to have conflict, it's when. We're definitely different people, everybody's different, and we're going to have to deal with a little bit of negotiation. What we want to teach here is how we can negotiate and get through conflict in a way that builds you closer to your partner, creates stronger bonds with your partner, and really get on the side where the relationship wins. The Fair Fight for Change is not about winning a fight. The Fair Fight for Change is about fighting for your relationship. So you're both fighting for the relationship. So here's the Fair Fight for Change process. It's a 10-step process. I would get somebody in the audience to please read it. Once they're done reading each of these steps, you can start by explaining it. The first one is simply saying, I'd like to have a fair fight with you. I'd like to negotiate something fairly. Do you have time right now? Would you be able to do that with me now? And if it's a yes, they continue on. They reflect on their complaint. They state their complaint out loud. The partner repeats it. What's really important after somebody's read all of these 10 steps is going back to say a little bit about how to invite the partner, a little bit about the partner repeat again. We want to make sure that everybody knows that if it's repeated back accurately, the person is saying thank you. Very important, as we're going to be working with coaches when we do this exercise here in the classroom, that they also know that if it's not repeated back correctly, it's okay to say, hold on, let me try again, and not move forward until we know that there is a shared meaning between the two. The appreciations, the asking for what you want very specifically, and going back and forth in your considerations. So the coaches play a very important part in this, but we'll hear more about the coach's role in this as we move forward. The Fair Fight for Change process allows us a very powerful tool that's structured, that keeps our passions and our intensity and potentially instinct or volatility or whatnot. It keeps it at a structured level. It keeps it at a minimum. What we find is that when we're passionate about something or it's mixed up with so many emotions and we're about to negotiate something, what happens is that sometimes we can say something we don't mean to say, something that we can't take back, something that can harm the relationship. And so with all those passions, we've seen plenty of individuals and partnerships that we've seen them do this exercise, and one of the things that they say afterward is, they're looking back down at their wallet card and they look back down and back up to make sure that they're getting it right, that they don't have time to have their passions, their emotions flailing. They're really being careful about how they say something, how they negotiate something, and that's exactly what we're trying to teach here. And we want to make sure that it's a habit to think about what you want to say, make sure you're saying it very clearly, non-accusatory. We're saying, what we would like instead, and a very structured process to make sure that those things like dirty fighting don't come out and don't cause more distance than anything else. Two people honestly can get past so much. There's many people have been through so many traumas and so many life experiences, and the issues themselves people can get past. It's how we do it. So the Fair Fight for Change process, just to bring up the psychologist George Bach, which I referred to earlier about somebody who interviewed murderers on death row or in prison. And he really found that these people were in love. They murdered the people that they loved the most. And part of it was that they didn't have the means to negotiate conflict in a nice way. So George Bach really was out there emphasizing, encouraging conflict, encouraging fighting, but encouraging fighting in a good way. We all deal with conflict, and he said, let's deal with it. So that's where the Fair Fight for Change process came from, and we're about to move forward and learn more about it now. The timeout tip. Please have somebody go ahead and read this slide, and then you can re-emphasize what we know within ourselves. If we know that we can't take it anymore within negotiation, or we're overwhelmed, or we might say something that comes out wrong, we can take a timeout. In this class experience, we're also able to allow coaches to keep an eye out for when we need a timeout as well. So when we're about to say something we don't mean, when we know that we can't fight fairly any longer, it's okay. This teaches us to say, hey, I need a break. And that's what it's all about. Of course, no drugs, no alcohol, no thinking about what you're going to say next when you come back. It's really a break from the negotiation. One of the things is that it should really only be 20 to 40 minute break. What happens often is that a negotiation gets too much for us. We take a break, we walk away, and sometimes we don't come back to that negotiation for days, weeks, months, sometimes years. What this is really promoting is coming from goodwill, coming from the best place ever to have your relationship win, and to come back and resolve some conflicts. So you take your time out and return to the issue. Now we're going to have to go over some ways that we see a fair fight. There's going to be fair fight results. There's going to be fair fight ways. We're going to go through these slides one at a time. It's really important that you as an instructor do not just fast forward through all of these slides. What we're really teaching is for people to be their own coaches and watch what they say, how they say it, and all these other small factors that play a really important part in creating a space and negotiating fairly. So we go to number one, facial expression. Even though we know full well that facial expressions say so much, it's important to review the fact that we ourselves, when we start negotiating something that we're passionate about, we're watching our own facial expression. In this exercise, when we open it up to the class and we have coaches, the coaches will also be in charge of watching the facial expressions. But what we're learning is that we ourselves need to watch what our face says. So in a fair fight, we have an open, responsive, reflective, interested, real facial expression. Unfair fight, you'd see a closed, guarded, impassive, disinterested, or masked face. It's very common to say that your actions speak louder than words, that your body position speaks louder than what you're saying. So if you're saying yes, but at the same time your facial expression says you don't want to be there, or you don't like what you're saying, or you don't like the person in front of you, we have to be careful what we're trying to express for real, because that's what they're going to listen to, and that's what we're listening to oftentimes as well. The focus should be here and now. We should focus on one thing. We want to make sure that we're not bringing in a museum full of past problems, past issues, past hurts and pains. It's very tempting to know that somebody's finally listening to you, or somebody's listening to you, or you have their attention, and you want to talk about everything. But what we want to make sure that we're doing is that we're going through one issue at a time. When we conquer one issue and we see that this fair fight for change can actually resolve something in a positive manner and in a positive light, then we realize that we can go ahead and do one at a time and do the other ones. But for now, we're keeping focus. Of course, as we started this, when you turn to this slide, you'd ask somebody to go ahead and read that slide. The next slide. You'd open it up to the participants. What do you think this looks like? And it's exactly about bringing everything right now. We're so tempted that somebody's paying attention to what we're saying and to what an issue is, that we might be very tempted to bring everything in. But we're not going to bring everything in the kitchen sink. we're going to go ahead and stick to just one subject and see how we can do that. And once we get used to it, we can do one subject at a time. The next slide is communication. I'd ask somebody to read it. Part of it from the very beginning, the good talking, the good listening skills. We want to make sure we're clear. We want to make sure we're accurate. If we need to give in a little bit more information so that they know what we're speaking about, that's going to be very important. If our communication is non-empathetic, non-responsive, we're not interested, or inaccurate, or there's no feedback at all, it's going to be an unfair fight. We want to make sure that we're being very clear and direct so that we have a shared meaning and we know what exactly we're speaking about. For this slide, I would go ahead and ask the audience, what do you see here? What are some of these faces? What are some of these situations? And generally, as you can see, you'd have people saying, two people that are not showing empathy towards one another, are not paying attention to one another. One person that wants to talk and the other person that doesn't, or both that are distant, but they're not ready to negotiate anything. Facts or fantasy? We all come with our perspective, with our opinions, with our concerns, with what we believe the situation is and what the truth of that situation is for us. And it's really important that we're relaying those. But if we're relaying anything else, any sort of, dishonest or distorted view of what's going on, it's not going to be helpful. At the end of the day, what's fact is fact, and what's not is not. So that's also going to be one way where you see a fair fight versus an unfair fight. It's very important to stick with the facts. And this says the same thing, the information and reality. It needs to be accurate. If there's lies, we're not going to be fighting fair. For every single one of these slides, please go ahead and reach out to the audience. They should be a part of it. And during the whole time, you should be letting them know. Please think about each of these, because these are the things that you will be watching within yourself as you're having a fair fight. Well, for conversations that matter, we have to have these at the forefront of our thought to make sure that we're fighting fair. What we really want to do is make sure that the dreams and the goals that we have for our future are coming true. And the best way to do it is to just be very conscious of all of these different points and be conscious of what we do. Comments and impact. This is really important. For those people that we spend our lives with and spend so much time with, we generally know their belt lines. So if we're hitting below the belt, whether it is that we're talking about, we say something not nice about their religion or their physical form or their parents or their childhood, we're fully aware of which ones will hit hard. So in order to fight fair, we want to make sure that we're staying above the belt. We want to make sure that we're refraining from certain dirty fighting tactics. That would be sarcasm, ridiculing, threatening, even psychoanalyzing or assuming. We're sticking to the fair side as best we can. Also, the willingness to accept your own contributions to the problem. That's responsibility. In order for it to be a fair fight, you have to be open to accepting the responsibility that you take and also be open to change. Of course, on the unfair side of that, in contrast, would be justifying, denying, ignoring your own part, or being rigid, fixed, and unchanging. It's important that, if you remember from the very beginning, part of goodwill and the goodwill umbrella, that's one of the 4 C's. Caring, commitment, communication, and change. We must be willing to change if we want to make sure that we're compromising and relating to each other and having the relationship win. As a fair fight result, we start with importance and self-worth. I would go ahead and have somebody read the slide and just emphasize exactly. If you feel better and more important and you feel worthy and valued after the fight, then that means it was fair. If you feel less important and you feel less self-worth and you feel misunderstood, it probably was not a fair fight. The next one, resentment and fear. I would ask somebody to go ahead and read it, and you can see resentment would be relieved. Fear would be decreased. And that would be a positive and fair fight. In contrast, inhibited, repressed, resentment, or the fear would be in trust, closeness, and reparation. I do want to go over this one just to be sure that it's clear. For a fight to be fair, you'd have the trust be increased. You would feel closer. You would feel more affectionate. As far as reparation, you'd feel that the hurts were mended and you were willing to or did make up for the mistakes or mistreatment or whatever that might look like. Otherwise, you can see on the unfair side, you feel decreased trust, you feel more distant as far as closeness, and there was no attempt to make up for the feelings. Forgiveness and progress, I would ask somebody to read it and just emphasize, if you're able to forgive partner and feeling like you've made progress, yeah, that's fair. But at the very end, and you're sort of combing over your feelings over that fair fight, you don't feel like you can forgive. You feel more withdrawn, and you feel that you didn't make any progress toward a solution, then it was an unfair fight result. Now we get to the coaching guidelines. After going through all those, and we reached out to the audience, made sure that they read some. You can ask them a little bit about it, about some of those pictures and some of those results. We talk about the coaching guidelines. And what we're really gonna get started with is getting into this exercise. And this is the beginning of all of the guidelines to complete the exercise in the class. And what they're really gonna do when they go home. What we have done in this section is go over the different stages of engagement, which is really important that we know that we're in the adult stage to be able to say, could we please have a fair fight for change? And to check in with ourselves if our jug is full. Because if our jug is full, we want to make sure to empty the jug first so that we can come on over and do a fair fight for change. So we'd ask somebody in the audience to go ahead and read the coaching guidelines. And you'd emphasize, number one, in between each of the 10 steps, you want to make sure that you're holding the discussions out loud with your coach. This isn't just for your coach. What it truly is so that you can hear in your mind what you're discussing with your coach, how you're discussing it, how you're figuring out, what the complaint is it specific enough? Did I hear the other person right? All of those check-ins, sort of, you're doing with a coach here in the class, but when you go home, you're not going to have that coach with you. You're learning how to be your own coach, and that's very important. As you learn to be your own coach, you learn how to keep in track with the 10 steps. You don't want to move off of them. You don't want to get into a different sort of conversation. You want to be able to watch yourself. If you need a timeout, you're calling for it. And that's through what we just learned about the fair fight or the non-fair fights, right? The results and the tactics. We want to make sure that we realize, oh, my facial expression is not matching what I'm trying to do here. Wait, I think I might need a timeout, right? Or I just hit below the belt, or I was about to hit below the belt. Maybe I need a timeout. So we're constantly watching ourselves and making sure that we're doing this right, so we have the very best chance to make this conflict an opportunity to grow closer rather than create more distance, create more conflict, or anything else that does not go toward the future that you really want with this partner. What's really important for the coaches is that some people might think, oh, for a coach, they'd come up with the best idea to resolve your issue. This is the exact opposite. In this experience, the coaches are not there to resolve the issue for you. And the coaches are definitely there to just guide you along, keep you in line with the 10 steps, let you know about, point out a timeout, be your mirror in what you want. But it's really only you within the partnership that's able to resolve those issues. You two are the ones that know what you really like, what works for you. What works for one person and one couple does not work for all couples. So please beware as well, you as an instructor, that you two are not giving resolutions to problems, or being surprised with the resolutions that people come up with. Whether it's that somebody decided that the other person gets to make decisions on when they cut their hair or what hairstyle they have. You know, that might be something outside of one person's culture, but it might be everything for somebody else's culture. And it can be a number of different things. So we also need to be aware that what our worldview is and what our norms are not everybody else's worldview or norms. But this space is a space for a couple to figure out what works for them and what works for them best. So as we go along at the very end of the 10-step process, once a decision has been made and the Fair Fight for Change has come to an end of the 10-step process, it's not over just yet. The coaches will look at the fair fight checklist and see if in fact you guys have had a fair fight, which is essentially what a couple would be doing at home. If they have had a fair fight, they get to move on and they write down their relationship agreement. If they have not had a fair fight, they should start again and try to do the Fair Fight for Change and practice it again. That's what all of this is. This is all just practice. Whether it's riding a bike, whether it's a new dance, whether it's brushing your teeth. At the very, very beginning, it's clumsy, it's uncomfortable, it's sort of awkward, but we practice again and again. And what we're looking at is that future that you see yourself in with this partner. And what you see, whatever dreams you might have, we can try to get there. So encourage empathy and appreciation. And here is the Fair Fight checklist. So we're gonna ask these 7 questions at the end of the fair fight. The coaches are the ones that fill it out in this class scenario. They go through whether it's a positive facial expression, do we stick on one complaint, communicated their feelings, and all the rest. I would encourage you to get a participant to read the list. But as long as you have 5 of those that are yeses, then it's a fair fight. If it's less than 5 of those 7, then they do need to go ahead and start again. And it's no big deal. We're all learning. These are all stepping stones. Here is the relationship agreement. The couple themselves will choose what's the specific measurable behavior that they have agreed upon. What's really nice about this is that once they know that they've had the fair fight, and the coaches will pull out the couple's relationship agreement and write down how this agreement will benefit our relationship of that one partner, and the other coach will be able to write down how this agreement will benefit our relationship of the other partner. So I'll have both of the partners' perspectives, and that's really important because then they know exactly why they're doing this. It's not, that they're doing it begrudgingly. It's really a negotiation that they sort of went back and forth on, and it's what is important to them, and as they weigh it out with the behavior and how important that behavior is. And sometimes it's a teetering process, and that's okay. This exercise is not meant for somebody to jump up and say, great, I'm going to approach this subject and he or she or they will have to do it. Nobody does have to do it. Things might not get resolved. There are many issues that might not get resolved for quite some time. It depends how important things are for the other person. And as long as we're coming from a point of empathy and love and care, we might have empathy and compassion for the fact that, this isn't the best for that person at this time. So we do talking tips and we talk about it and we try to relay how we feel. We try to, we give our partner the opportunity to have empathy. But it's the other way around too. Just like in talking tips, at the very end, you can decide to switch roles, you can decide to have a conversation about it, or you can just decide to be happy that you learned that perspective. So just as one person has talking tips or something to relay, the other person might too. So we go back and forth, and it's really important that on the relationship agreement, we're saying exactly why, we've come to this decision. The duration of this agreement, of course, for how long we're going to do it. We want to make sure that we are empowering our couples to reach goals. So where so many people might be very ambitious and say, oh, I'll do it for the whole year, or I'll do it from now on. Please be sure that you as the instructor, that you are encouraging them to pick a small duration of time. Maybe it's 2 weeks, maybe it's a month, maybe it's 2 months, it depends what it is. But this is just a duration for them to come and schedule a review or tune up, or they can continue it or they can not continue it. But you want to make sure that we're trying to get them to reach their goals. We don't want to set them up for something that they're not going to be able to attain. So encourage your participants to just pick a month, pick a few weeks, whatever that might look like. And it's okay. If they want to continue it, then they continue it. But they can check it out first. And that's what a relationship agreement is about. And reminders for keeping this agreement alive. And that can be with a calendar alarm, a calendar notification, calendar on your fridge. Every time, everybody has dinner every Monday, so that dinner could be the reminder. Whatever that looks like. When you're doing the scheduled times for review or change, I do want to make sure that I'm going back to that. Some people just say, every Monday. Find out what time Monday. Is it in the morning before they leave for work? Do they get together for lunch on Mondays? Do they have dinner together on Mondays? How about if Mondays somebody stays late to work? Make sure to sort of brainstorm all the different possibilities and get to a time and place for that review. And that can be put on a calendar invite or whatever they choose for a reminder. So when we start the Fair Fight for Change process, we are going to make sure that we have a couple to come up and model it. Please be aware that if you are worried about a volunteer in your audience, you are engaging with the couple ahead of time, during a break, or wherever you can pass by them quietly and say, could you please help me teach the next section? If they say yes, great, and you can call them up during this time. But generally asking for volunteers works just fine. So make sure you get 2 volunteers to come on up and have the chairs set up where they're facing each other. Don't forget, at this point in time, we need 2 couples, because what we're going to do is show them the Fair Fight for Change process with the coaches, because that's the exercise that we get to practice here in the class. We get the 2 chairs facing each other for the couple that's doing the Fair Fight for Change process, and the 2 chairs right behind them, which could be diagonally sort of facing the front or facing each other. And you yourself as the instructor, please bring up a chair, sit next to them, explain to them what they are doing. We always want to make sure, again, as I know I've said, that we're not standing in front of them, standing above them, giving them the guidelines to the exercises without us ourselves sitting down, leveling with them, and being at the same eye level. So please have the Fair Fight for Change process up on your PowerPoint in case they need to look over and see. They will also have their wallet cards with them. Please make sure that you've handed them out just before this exercise, but not ahead of time, so that people aren't really fidgeting with them throughout the class and trying to figure out what it is next. Okay, so you explained the Fair Fight for Change process. In between each of these numbers, in between 1 and 2, and 2 and 3, 3 and 4, and so on, you are letting them know that at that point in time, they're speaking out loud to their coach before they head back to do that step. Let them go through the process, and you too are a coach for the coaches. So keep a vigilant eye and make sure that the coaches are catching the dirty fighting, are catching the facial expressions, they are catching a number of these different things, so that they're learning how to be coaches for themselves as well. And be sure that if in fact something wasn't repeated back correctly, that the coaches are catching that. But you're of course always involved in any and every modeling of these exercises. Remind them please to lean into each other and figure out which fair fight they're going to have and that they both approve. That this is a comfortable subject that they're both willing to say out loud in front of the group. You don't want somebody to grab a subject and before you know it, it's very uncomfortable. This space has to be a safe space for people to feel comfortable being vulnerable. And something that's very, very important is to make sure that they are able to pick a subject that's not a dynamite subject. Remind them they are just learning. These are training wheels. They should not go to a dynamite subject. They should not go to a huge problem in their life. And this is learning the steps in order to get to the point to be able to handle those problems, the bigger problems. We want to make sure that they're getting the training wheels first before they're, taking off on a motorcycle, for that matter. Okay, so you step back and you have them model the exercise. They go all the way through the 10 steps, and the 10 steps, of course, that at step 9 and 10, they can continue back and forth with the help of their coach to figure out whether it's yes with considerations or whatnot, to figure out exactly what that relationship agreement will look like. Please also keep an eye on the coaches that they're not offering a resolution to their issues, but they're guiding the couple through figuring it out themselves. The couple is going to go home, they're going to go home on their own. They're not going to go home with the coaches, and they need to sort of get a little taste of that, of what we're creating, which is a habit, a little taste of that going back and forth and resolving their issues for themselves. Great. Once that's done, the coaches will go over the fair fight checklist and then the relationship agreement. Always go back and ask them, how did that feel? How did it go for you? And then you're going to go ahead and break up the room into 4s, where one couple is doing the fair fight for change and the other couple is doing the coaching, and then they switch. So every single person, every single couple in your vicinity is going to have a chance to be coaches, and they're going to have a chance to do a fair fight for change. It might take some time. This is a very long process sometimes. Please put some music on and let them have some space. For this one, sometimes with the coaches, just learning to be coaches and all that good stuff, I would walk around a little bit and make sure that they always know that they can raise their hand and somebody can come over. Ideally, you do have a co-facilitator with you. Okay. Well, remember, remind them that it's not about fighting the partner. We could strong arm somebody and win a fight and win in a sense, but we can do serious damage to our relationship. What is important about the fair fight for change is that both partners are on the side of winning for the relationship, what's best for the relationship, not necessarily just their side. They're not on opposite sides. That's what's most important. They're on the side of the relationship. And that's what's going to allow them to honestly tell each other how they feel, what they want instead, and give themselves the best chance of working out differences on behalf of the relationship.